Welcome back to another episode of Warren Cali. In this episode, I'm going to detail the story of a four-tray Hoover named Judabean. The Hoovers are a gang that formed in the early 70s and later joined the Crips. The Hoovers had several sets under the Hoover umbrella, which were all formed at different times, starting with the 7-4 Hoovers being the first initial Hoover set. And the 7-4 Hoovers would later be followed by the rest of the Hoovers. The four-tray Hoovers would eventually form by the late 70s, and Judabean was an instrumental part in that, and also what the four-tray Hoovers would become. Judabean had rank and leadership in the four-tray Hoovers, and is also credited as being in the early foundation of the four trays, being one of the founders of the gang, from carrying his position in the four trays from jail to the streets. But by the 80s, a new up-and-coming gang who began to make a name for themselves, called the Rollin Crips, would challenge the four trays and the rest of the Hoover sets. By 1983, the Hoovers and the Rollin 40s issues would start, and they would never end. The Rollin 40s and the Hoovers issues began to get deadly, and many people died behind this war. On the evening of July 11, 1989, this started off as an eventful night for members of the four trays, as well as the Rollin 40s. Between 6 and 7 p.m., Maurice, Judabean, 8-Ball, and Big Black, all members of the four-tray Hoovers, were hanging out on the corner of 43rd and Kansas Street. Things quickly turned ugly when a Rollin 40 Crip named Troy, who was standing out of a window on the second floor of a nearby apartment building, yelled out this was the Hoover. This pissed Judabean and the rest of the Hoovers off. They ran to the apartment building where Troy lived, kicked the door down, and started beating down Troy. After beating down Troy, the Hoovers celebrated, and they returned back to the street they were hanging out on. But moments later, Troy drove by with a car full of Rollin 40 members. They then opened fire on the Hoovers. Big Black was shot in the ankle, and Judabean was shot in the arm. Big Black went to the hospital, but Judabean refused. He went to an aunt's house nearby. Judabean's girlfriend Kimberly learned of the shooting and came to his aid at his auntie house. She intended to drive him to the hospital, but they never made it there. En route to the hospital, Judabean asked Kimberly to stop in front of Troy's apartment, the scene of the altercation earlier, and also the shooting. A group of Rollin 40 Crips stood on the second floor of Troy's apartment building. One of them had a gun in plain sight. Judabean rolled down the car window and yelled out in an angry voice, "I wish you would shoot me." He then got out of the car and repeated the same thing. This turned out to be a bad idea. The Rollin 40 Crips started firing at Judabean. When the shooting stopped, Judabean was lying on the ground. One bullet had passed through his neck and lodged in his spine. Another had passed through his right leg. Kimberly drove off in fear, leaving Judabean in the street. After the second shooting, those on the street fled. Some ran down the street, and others piled in the cars and drove away. While speeding away, one car made a U-turn and trampled Judabean's body, crushing his chest. Several people who was at the scene of that crime would tell the police that Troy was the driver of that car. When Troy was arrested, he told the police he was the driver, but he also later denied it. But many people would say if he wasn't the driver, he was in the car with the other Rollin 40 Crips. When police arrived to the scene, they seen that Judabean had been shot 3 times, one in the arm, another in the right leg, and another one in the neck that lodged in his spine. Doctors would say that Judabean's death didn't come from the shooting. In fact, he would have survived ordinary medical care. Judabean's death came from blunt force when he was ran over by the car. Doctors stated that the chest injury was rapidly fatal and would have caused death within 1 or 2 minutes from the car running him over. Troy was the only one charged for this murder after being placed at the crime and naturally admitting to it. Judabean was a major loss for the four-tray Hoovers, and over the years following his death, the four trays and their turf would see a major change. Over time, a lot changed in the four-tray Hoovers' turf. Several members went to prison, several died in wars, or some just moved to different areas, and numbers of the four-tray Hoovers dwindled in the following years. This left space for many gangs to move into the four trays territory. Many young crews and cliques would pop up all over the area, but this later transformed into the area being claimed by the four trays' top rival, the Rollin 40 Crips. The Rollin 40 Crips would turn this area into what is called today the Dark Side 40s turf, which is a highly active area. Now in the year 2025, the four-tray Hoovers don't get mentioned much, but the Hoovers still recognize them and still mention them when the Hoovers are brought up, even adding them to the 716 slogan the Hoovers use to add up all the Hoover sets as one. You may not hear about the four-tray Hoovers much anymore, but members like Judabean left an impact on the Hoovers' legacy, especially for the four-tray Hoovers. The Hoovers have lost sets like the 9-0 Hoovers due to inner circle beef, and that line they pushed made many other gangs form and revolt, and some became rivals off various factors, and some even debate they lost a lot of turf in their gang wars with numerous gangs. But them being still highly active and still having multiple sets is a testament of the foundation and the type of gang the Hoovers are. This will conclude this episode. If you haven't already, check out my previous episodes. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.